We had something of a false start a moment ago due to the... Oh my God. I'm hearing the clicking. It went away. Okay. We're just having wacko problems over here. Hopefully we're live now, John. The reason why we had something of a false start...
Yeah.
Dude, the clicking. I'm going to lose my mind. Anyway, what I was saying earlier is that I really can't imagine a circumstance where something could be going more in the direction... Dude, I'm going to scream with this clicking. Stand by. I thought I had that licked. This is a really vexing problem. Now,
I can play a clip. I can play an audio clip of Fauci while you...
Man. Okay, here we go. So we started a moment ago. Some unexplained issue prevented us from being live, but we are now live on the John E Hoover channel, on Crowdsource the Truth 3, on Crowdsource the Truth Forever, and hopefully on Rumble as well. Let's see if Rumble is doing what it needs to do. And it is. So there we go, John. Lots of options for people to watch us. The thing I was getting at is, if people saw Anthony Fauci getting grilled on Capitol Hill by Rand Paul and by Senator Kennedy, he says he didn't spike. Despite not knowing what spiking is, he didn't spike it.
Well, tonight we're gonna talk about why Wuhan is in the news and why, from my perspective, this is still like watching Penn and Teller, right? So to me, all the hullabaloo about Wuhan is hullabaloo about SARS-CoV-2, right? And you know that my interest in SARS-CoV-2 is limited because I go by thickness, right? And so I look at how many people are dead in Vietnam. I look at how many people are dead in Cambodia and Laos and Mongolia. I look at how many people are dead in Malaysia and Burma. So I'm not looking where they want me to look. I look where I want to look. I look in Nigeria. I look in Tanzania. I look in Ethiopia. Right, so I'm looking...
didn't come from Virginia. Oh, wait a minute, maybe it did.
Right. All right, so let's talk about that. All right, so I think it's important. Let's recap the past week, because you had a hell of a week. I've been getting motivated by your work ethic. And so in the past 10 days, I've published 10 videos. So I want to review some of the stuff that you did in the last week, because I was watching your show with Larry Klayman. You did another Citizens Grand Jury with Dr. Judy Mikovits the other day.
Yes.
And it was amazing. It was amazing.
That was historic, wasn't it?
It was. And Kent Hickenlively, he contributed a whole bunch of really interesting observations. And, you know, there's more to come, right? The case isn't closed yet. So next week, I think you guys have another testimony coming from another expert. And there's more evidence, right, that we'll be talking about tonight that I think also probably needs to be entered into evidence. So this was an amazing show. If you guys didn't get a chance to see this on Crowdsource the Truth 3, you need to watch this. This is Larry Klayman's grand jury, right, Citizens Grand Jury, right, with Larry Klayman, with Judy Mikovits and Ken Hickenlively, and this was amazing. I was watching this live when you guys were doing this. So this was dynamite, and again, when you take the totality of all of the evidence, the testimonies, etc., it's quite compelling. And you had, yesterday, you were out in the streets and there were people on the corner somewhere. What was that all about?
That was a protest against New York State Senator Brad Hoylman, I think his name is. He is New York's only openly gay state senator. And that's really irrelevant, but he is all about telling you what you can do with your religion. He's eliminated the religious exemption, and I know a lot of really serious religious people, certainly of the Christian faith, probably don't appreciate some of his ideas, so I'm not sure who he's representing. You know, he's supposed to represent New York, but he lives on Fifth Avenue, And this stretch of Fifth Avenue, these apartment buildings are some of the most expensive apartments in the city. So this is some rich jackass who is married to his husband and they have 2 daughters. And he sits up there telling New Yorkers what they should do with the vaccines and what they should do with their kids. I object to this guy basically completely.
Well, again, there's a lot of people that have an opinion that don't have all the facts. Right. And so today, before the show, I keep very, very strange hours, right? So I was watching what his name is, Rainer Fulmick in Germany, was doing a broadcast and had Dr. Simone Gold on the show. And he's got all these lawsuits going on, and so she was on the show and it was live. And I was in the chat room and I was doing what I do in the chat room, which is adding observation. Yeah, just observations, right? And it looks like they were shaken a bit when they saw that I was there. No, well, I was recognized. There were people who were in the chat room like, holy moly, John Hoover, blah, 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 blah. Huh. And, so first of all, I was recognized. And then Rainer Fulmick knows of me because of the conversation. Well, of course, because I've been working or talking with Tom Renz and with Carl Schwartz. So both of them know Rainer. And, so they have my materials, have told him about me, and then I showed up in one of his shows and with Dr. Simone Gold. But the net of it is that the stuff we're going to talk about tonight, these guys don't know this stuff. The only people that seem to know this is our audience. And then all these other people who think they're trying to help the cause, it's like they don't have 3/4 of the story if they don't have this part. So thinking that the story begins in Wuhan. Again, 2 weeks ago, we had David Hawkins on the show, and we were talking about, Wuhan. Wuhan's already the 4th inning of the story. It's the 4th inning of the game by the time we get to Wuhan. We got Lieber at Harvard. We got Dr. Chu, her husband, and her whole crew coming out of Winnipeg. And this was months before. This was the summer of 2019. We have the worst outbreak of influenza in Australia in the summer of 2019. So we're taking the story back long before Wuhan as it pertains to SARS-CoV-2. Okay? Now, what Dr. Judy is like so close. She's like knocking on the door, and I don't know if she's like connected these dots yet. But when Dr. Judy says, the COVID-19 disease and the SARS-CoV-2 virus, that link, we haven't quite made it the way we normally would make it. And that's why we talk about influenza. Because maybe many of these symptoms that we're seeing are actually reconstructed pandemic influenza. And that would explain a lot in the face of the fact that there aren't 50 people dead from SARS-CoV-2 in Vietnam. The fact that there aren't 2,500 dead in Nigeria. So when we gain a different type of perspective, we start to say, well, wait a second. Dr. Birx told us that we look at deaths liberally in the United States. Basically, if you had Alzheimer's and you were in hospice care with Alzheimer's, we heard this from Dr. Jensen. You had Dr. Jensen on your show. Dr. Jensen came on my show, and he told us this. He said, if you had somebody who's in hospice care with Alzheimer's, who's, clearly on their way towards dying in the next N months, and they contracted COVID, they're counting that as a COVID death. And Dr. Birx tells us this, right? She tells us this verbatim. So that's why we get to this big, big, big number in the United States and in other places as well. But when we look at Laos and we look at Cambodia and we look at Nigeria and we look at Ethiopia and we look at Burma and we look at Malaysia, and we realize that there are states like Kansas and Iowa that have more people dead. Right? So that's where the disconnect comes in. It's like, well, wait a second. That doesn't add up. There has to be a common sense litmus test here that needs to get passed before we can continue the conversation. And that's never been addressed.
Let me ask you a common sense question, because, one of the most conspicuous aspects of this dramatic 180-degree turn from, whereas last week, if we made a video saying that COVID-19 came from a leak from a lab in Wuhan, we'd be at risk of being eliminated from social media, having the channel deleted. We'd have to invite our viewers to watch the show on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen or patreon.com/IamJohnCullen or Subscribestar or Patreon/Crowdsource the Truth. And now this week, the New York Times, CNN, Rand Paul, Dopey Joe Biden, he can remember that he's eating chocolate chip ice cream, but that's about it. And now they're all saying, oh yeah, probably came from a lab in Wuhan. We've never seen a reversal like this, John. This is literally exactly as if in, December of 2002, they said, forget about that 9/11 commission. We actually have no evidence that these 19 guys who could barely fly Cessnas crashed those planes. And we don't know if it was Osama bin Laden or Dick Cheney or Benjamin Netanyahu. We don't know. It could be any of these
might have
guys.
been the Venezuelans. Yeah.
Right. They just totally did a 180. This is like if the Warren Commission determined that Lee Harvey Oswald had nothing to do with the JFK assassination. And yet...
That's next week. All right. You're right. All right. So look, so we talked about some of the videos you did this past week. My videos are in complete suppression mode, right? So if you look at, I've done 10 videos in 10 days. And they're getting about 2,500 views. And one of the more recent ones, the title of it is "There Aren't 10 Dead in Beijing or Shanghai." And that's got 2,500 views. And it says it in the thumbnail. And it makes you wonder, how is it that a video like that, that's only a couple minutes long, it's rather dramatic in its claim, has 2,500 views. Now, I have 38,500 subscribers. And only 2,500 people have seen the video. I did another video this past week called Behind the Curtain, where we look at Mike Bloomberg and his connection to Johns Hopkins and the map, and his influence on Johns Hopkins and the reporting, and his zeal to get Donald Trump out of office. And when we look at how the map was used to convey certain emotions, the question is, again, does Mike Bloomberg realize that Kansas has more people dead than China? So he either does or he doesn't. Like, this is another double bind. And it's a double bind for Mike Bloomberg. It's a double bind for Anderson Cooper. It's a double bind for Rachel Maddow. It's a double bind for David Muir. And the question is, you guys either know that there aren't 10 dead in Shanghai. You either know that there aren't 10 dead in Beijing, or you don't. Right. One or the other. Right? Now, if you know that, and you're not telling America and the world, oh, by the way, there's not 10 people dead in Beijing. And the reason this is now amazingly relevant is because the Senate is grilling Fauci about Wuhan. Well, Wuhan is China. And if we're going to talk about, did it come from Wuhan? Did it come from Wuhan? Did it come from Wuhan? How is Beijing not relevant in a conversation about China and Wuhan? If there aren't 10 people dead from SARS-CoV-2 in Beijing, in Shanghai, how does Fauci not mention this? He doesn't know this either. So again, it's a double bind. Either he knows it and isn't telling Rand Paul, isn't telling Senator Kennedy, or he's ignorant of the fact that I know, and the whole audience knows that there's not 10 people dead in Beijing or Shanghai. Hasn't been. There's not 250 dead in Hong Kong. There's not 1,000 dead in Thailand. But France, which is fewer people than Thailand, has over 100,000 dead. And Fauci doesn't. So, for example, in this video, I gave Fauci a Queen's Gambit. I gave Fauci a piece of ammunition to use against Rand Paul? Will he play the Queen's Gambit?
He was just
What
stuttering
was
and
it?
mumbling the whole time.
All right, what did I give him? What did I give Fauci to play as a card against Rand Paul?
I don't know.
Rand Paul's Kentucky has more people dead than all of China. All of China. Okay? So the question to MSNBC, CNBC, NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, everybody, this isn't relevant? You got Fauci testifying in front of the Congress about did it or did it not come from Wuhan, did it or did it not come from a bat, did it or did it not get engineered, and the fact that there aren't 10 people dead in the capital city, in the largest city in China, and that Kentucky has more dead than China. Now, there's some people in the audience who say, well, China's lying. So I go to Korea, right? And Rhode Island has more people dead than Korea, right? Iowa has more people dead than Nigeria, and Nigeria has over 200 million people. So it's not just China. And they're all can't be lying, right? Somebody said in the comments, well, they can't do this and they can't do this and Nigeria's this and Tanzania. It's like, well, what are you, racist? Do you think only white people can count? They know how to count the dead in Malaysia. They're good at that. Like you guys wouldn't believe the hospitals in Malaysia. I'm working on a series now where I'm going to show you medical tourism in Asia. And why people from Europe go to Vietnam, go to Malaysia, go to Thailand to get stuff done. Because it's not just cheaper, it's really good medicine. And you're going to be amazed when you see this stuff. So this past week, I was watching this footage. John Kennedy.
John.
Yeah.
Because it's everything that you're saying is, I knew you were going to say this. And it's right in line with what I'm thinking. Because although this is a dramatic shift from where the mainstream was 3 days ago, it's just a shift to another false story, isn't it?
Well, indeed. And, the good news is Fauci's integrity is now being questioned. And people are starting to realize he's maybe, not quite the shiny, guy that everybody thought he was a moment ago. But, again, that's not the story. And we did a show, 6-8 months ago called, when you think the story or the story isn't the story, right? And once upon a time, I thought the story here was that, there were two pandemics happening at the same time. And that is, that's a big part of the story that most people don't know. Like Reiner Fulmick doesn't know that, and Simone Gold doesn't know that, right? They don't know that. But the real story is something that we heard from Dr. Judy when Dr. Judy came on the show with us, right? So you, me, Dr. Judy did a show together, and she started telling us about the development of influenza burden right after the 2009 epidemic. And she started telling us, oh yeah, right after 2009, they came up with that. That's the story. That's the story. And so that's why I'm eager to get back with Dr. Judy to talk about that aspect of it. But the other interesting point was, remember, Dr. Judy had no awareness of the work of Taubenberger. She didn't know Jeffrey Taubenberger and Ann Reed had reconstructed the pandemic influenza. She didn't know that. And they were both working under the same NIH umbrella. Right? And she wasn't aware of that, but she was aware of the influenza burden document. Right?
Yeah, stand by 1 second, John, because people are noticing the clicking, as am I. I can't believe it's back. Stand by.
There is some asymptomatic transmission. In all the history of respiratory-borne
What the hell
viruses,
just happened that we hear? Oh, my God.
It was me. That was me.
Oh.
I'm entertaining people. I'm entertaining the audience.
I don't know why this clicking... Man,
you work on the clicking,
I'm going to scream.
And I'll play Fauci clips. I'll play Fauci clips while you work on
They can't hear anything. The clicking. Engage the audio interface. Two different audio interfaces. It's worse.
Yeah,
this is unbelievable.
Now I hear it. Now I hear it.
I'm gonna have an aneurysm. Hopefully it's gone. Dude, it's worse.
Yeah. All right. Why don't we mime the rest of the show?
No,
just
hang
do
on.
sign language.
I know what's happening. Okay, it's two separate things.
Okay.
I tell you, man, it ain't easy.
I've said it a million times. I don't know how you do it. The fact that it works at all, I found amazing. It's like, I don't know how it works.
There are so many little things that can go wrong. And it's funny, do you remember what reason they gave for discontinuing the space shuttle?
No, I don't recall.
After the second explosion, they determined it was too dangerous to operate. And I mean, when I consider the number of settings that all have to be correct for this to work, it's amazing the space shuttle didn't explode every single time they turned it on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
We're back
No
now.
doubt.
Everything's good.
All right. All right. Why don't we jump over to the deck I prepared for this show? We've got a bunch of video for the patron-only hour. For those of you who are patrons, when you come over to Patreon and Subscribe Star at, I guess it's 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, at Patreon and SubscribeStar.com for either Crowdsource the Truth or I Am John Cullen, what you're going to see are a bunch of video clips that we queued up. We've got the Senator Kennedy, and I want everybody to see. You played it during the Larry Klayman. You entered that into evidence, but I think it's important that we review that again because, again, Fauci's integrity is starting to get questioned now. All right, so they're hitting him in his soft white underbelly, and now
calls for him to resign.
Well, just wait. Just wait. I mean, resign is going to look good when we're done with them. All right. So, all right, let's go to the deck, and you'll see how the case. All right. So this is evidence building into the case. All right. So let's start with the UK. All right. So we've got a bunch of friends now in the UK. We've got an audience throughout the islands, up in in Scotland and Wales. And I wanted to check in and see how you're doing in the UK. So I pulled that
Chaps.
up. And, well, that's what they say there, right? How you chaps doing, right?
Blokes.
Right?
Yeah.
But, I'm just trying to,
The
go with the flow.
vernacular. Yeah.
Right. All right. So what we see here is that you guys had two peaks, right? You had the early onset of the disease. We thought it was going away when we had the UK column guys come on the show, right? So we had Alex Thompson, David Scott come on the show. And that week that they were on the show, there were like 8 people dying a day or 11 people a day. And then we had the second wave of the outbreak in the UK. But now the UK is down to, there are days where no one is dying. Like I had to go back a couple days to find a day where anybody died. So the question is, if there's not that many people dying in the UK, haven't you guys achieved depletion of susceptibles? And that's the term that we really need to be using, not herd immunity. All right, let's use herd immunity when we're talking about animals, right? So when we talk about cows and we talk about sheep, we'll talk about herd immunity, right? When we're talking about foot and mouth disease.
Cows and sheep.
All right, when we talk about foot and mouth disease and we talk about all that stuff in the new lab in Kansas when they moved Plum Island, we'll talk about herd immunity. But when we're talking about human beings, let's talk about depletion of susceptibles.
Yeah,
right. Let's talk about depletion of susceptibles. Hasn't the UK achieved depletion of susceptibles? Well, if we measure by how many people are dying, I'd say yes. So the question is, if the UK is going through all these new lockdowns and whatever, what is that based on if it's not people dying? What are you guys looking at over there? All right, let's go to our next slide and see what else.
To drive around without traffic.
Yeah, let's go to the next slide. All right, let's go to Australia. We've got a lot of friends in Australia now who are watching the show.
One death.
And that was recently. All right, so Australia.
April. Yeah.
And they're locking down Victoria again. So Victoria's locking down, and the question to you guys is, but if nobody's dying, why are they doing this? And if you guys don't see these statistics, you need to show this to people, right? This is kind of important, right? Isn't that the reason we shut the world down was because everybody was dying, right? Wasn't that kind of the idea here?
I
Right.
think it was
so
so
the
that,
next,
Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos could buy more real estate.
well, yeah, well, or this, the CCP. So if we go to the next slide, we'll look at new cases in the United States. And you know that I don't like to track cases, but even cases are going down, 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 down. We call this depletion of susceptibles, right? So isn't that what we're looking at here as the case counts go down, down, down in the USA? This is daily positive cases. Now we go to the next slide, and the next slide we'll see daily deaths in the United States also trailing down, down, down. Now we've had 3 peaks, the main initial peak in the USA, that middle peak, and then the final peak. And the final peak was the worst of it all, right? So despite all the mask wearing and social distancing, more people died in the 3rd wave.
John, we've got a good question from the comments. Patricia is asking if you think it could be the vaccines given out over the last 12 months that have drastically reduced the deaths. We haven't had the vaccine for 12 months, have we?
No. Biden got his in December, and he was one of the first.
So it's like 4 months, and I don't know that there would be enough data about the vaccines or deaths within the last 4 months to make any kind of connection like that.
Yeah, to me, the whole conversation about the vaccine is to treat SARS-CoV-2. I'm not interested in SARS-CoV-2 that much. So I'm not really going to engage in a conversation about the vaccines for it because the virus hasn't killed 10 people in Beijing. So if there aren't 10 dead in Beijing and there aren't 10 dead in Shanghai, I'm not even going to get into a conversation about the vaccine for it. Let's talk about the BCG vaccine for tuberculosis. Let's talk about that. Why don't we use that in the United States for children? Because not that many kids die from tuberculosis. Right? So there's a vaccine called the BCG vaccine, and it's not used in the United States because not that many kids die from tuberculosis. Well, how many kids would have to die from tuberculosis each year for us to say, well, gee whiz, I think we better start vaccinating every kid in America from tuberculosis with the BCG vaccine? Is that an unrealistic question? What is the number? How many kids have to die? Is it 100? So if 100 kids die from tuberculosis, we're going to vaccinate every kid in America. I don't know. Is the number 250? Is the number 500? Is it 1,000? I don't know. But I know we don't vaccinate children in the United States with the BCG vaccine. Now, if there's only 240, 250 school-aged kids that have died from coronavirus, why are we rushing to vaccinate them with that and not this one? Wouldn't we want to give them this one too? How many kids are dying from tuberculosis? How many would need to die? So I guess 240, right? So if 240 kids die from tuberculosis, we're going to have to vaccinate the entire country with the BCG vaccine.
Have you created a slide looking at how many kids have died of tuberculosis? Because this is death rate from tuberculosis by age in the world from 1990 to 2017.
Okay, so that's death rate. And so
also
that's like
that's
a
like
percentage.
70-year-olds up there. So 5 to 14, which is children, no matter where you are on the timeline, it's not a lot.
Well,
why do they have that
right.
vaccine at all?
In certain parts of the world, tuberculosis kills 3,000 people a day. And
Where's
so
that?
it's over a million. Oh, daily deaths from tuberculosis. So tuberculosis is a wicked killer. Over 3,000 people a day die from tuberculosis. So the question is, what are these thresholds? In other words, at what point will everyone need to get vaccinated against Ebola? How many people die from Ebola? So assume that there's remember when Fauci predicted in Georgetown. He said there's going to be a surprise outbreak, right?
Yeah.
Well, now this administration, I don't recall him warning the Biden administration yet that this administration will also experience a surprise outbreak. I haven't heard that warning yet. I remember it for the Trump administration. Right.
Well, I think
so
that there's going to
Fauci,
be a different surprise for Joe Biden, and that's shaping up to look like the surprise is going to be he's not president anymore.
well, I mean, one step at a time. But Fauci absolutely warned the Trump administration the week before the inauguration, in fact, at Georgetown, and said this administration is going to experience a surprise outbreak, and there's no doubt. Now, the question is, how did he know that would happen in January of 2017?
I've just realized something, John. Anthony Fauci has a tell.
Yes, he does.
Like in poker, the tell
Yes,
is he's like,
yes.
well, we're definitely going to be surprised. That is essentially the same kind of statement as, I don't know what you mean, but we didn't do that.
Right.
It's like, how can you say that? How can you definitely
How
be
can you
surprised?
definitely be surprised? Right.
And how can you know you didn't do something if you don't know what that something is?
He's got to tell. And we've been picking and picking and picking apart his statements, his actions, and most importantly, his data. And the data doesn't support his statements. And so here's the thing. I love everybody who's fighting this fight, right? Regardless of background, regardless of politics, regardless of anything, right? You've got so many people who are fighting this fight. And I was, again, watching the Reiner Fulmick thing, Dr. Simone Gold and all this. Watching you with Larry Klayman and Kent, and you see how emotional everybody is. Everybody's trying to kind of save the world, so to speak, right now, and doing what we can to do it. And yet I'm sitting here with data. I'm kind of the boring guy. I'm the Harry Markopoulos. I'm the guy with the spreadsheets that nobody really wants to hang out with because I'm kind of weird.
I like hanging out
I'm
with
the
you.
guy. Well, I like hanging out with you, but that's another thing we have to explain to people. Can you pull up a picture of Riddick with the Hellhound? Pull up a picture of Riddick with the Hellhound
Riddick?
for people. Yeah. The Chronicles of Riddick.
Yeah, right.
All right. The Chronicles of Riddick. I need a photo of Riddick with the Hellhound.
It's Vin Diesel, isn't it?
Yeah. I need like a
that
wallpaper
movie was
image.
so bad. I saw, what was the first one called?
I don't remember, but if you can get a wallpaper size image, I don't recall, of the two of them together. So Riddick with the Hellhound, that's a toy. From the film.
I didn't make
There's
Google.
a scene.
I'm trying.
There's a scene in the movie. And yeah, there you go. You just passed one on the upper left. That looked good.
This?
One row up.
Chronicles of Riddick was the sequel. The first one I saw, it was terrible.
Now go back to the left and go one row up there. There. Yeah. Okay. So in the film, that's all right. That's close enough. So in the film Chronicles of Riddick, I guess he pulls a thorn out of the paw of the Hellhound or something or other. And the Hellhound is like this ruthless, like animal. And the two of them have a relationship. But other than that, the Hellhound is not a cute puppy, right? I mean,
nobody's friends with the Hellhound.
Right, that's not allowed. Right.
Pitch Black was the first one.
Right. So the analogy and the reason I want you to pull this up is in my world, you're Riddick and I'm the Hellhound. I'm nice to you. And that's it. Everybody else, I'm an asshole, and you guys see that all the time. I'm nice to Jason. That's it. Okay.
But
so
in public,
I'm
you're
ruthless
nice
to the audience.
Sally, sightseeing Sally. You like her?
I mean, well, again, I'm not just, I'm not going to just be nasty to people, but the point is, don't mistake my kindness towards Jason for anything other than that, because that's all it is. And it's, because we have a special relationship. But to me, this is you and me. You're the guy on the left. I'm the dog. All right, so don't.
I've
don't
even got
mistake,
the sniper
my
rifle.
kindness.
Look at that.
There you go. I like it. I like it. All right, let's pop back to the deck. We've only a couple more minutes before we got to go over to Patreon and
Right.
subscribe. So only like 5 minutes. All right. In the deck, we may need to jump ahead a couple slides, jump past all those slides of my stuff till you get to the CDC stuff. Yeah. Jump ahead, jump ahead, jump ahead. Okay.
There we go.
So the net of this is on the CDC. I want to kind of give you guys the bottom line up front. If you go to slide 17, we'll get to the bottom line up front. It's the first.
There you go.
Keep going. A little more. One
no.
more.
This one.
No, that's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. This is the bottom line. So the net is that since week 10 in the United States, more people have died from influenza than from COVID.
Right.
Okay. So that means week 10 is, well, February. The end of February is week 9. All right. So week 10 is the first week in March. So throughout most of March, April, and May, okay, look how many weeks you've got here. P&I deaths are outnumbering COVID deaths in the United States. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Now, the tragedy is that these people are not being given therapeutics.
Or the wrong
And
ones.
the reason they're not, if you're only going to run a PCR test, and the PCR test is only going to test for a handful of influenzas, and the one that you have is not on the PCR array, it's not going to detect it. Just like the PCR, by the way, the PCR array, the BioFire, the 19 and the 22 array on BioFire, doesn't test for tuberculosis. All right, so half these people could have
tuberculosis.
You don't know. That's why Dr. Kerry Mullis said, don't use this for diagnostic purposes.
But he
You're
died
not
of
gonna know
pneumonia in 2019. Kind of strange.
Right. Right. And by the way, Timothy Cunningham, who also worked at the CDC and died, who was found in the Chattahoochee, was a huge proponent of Zofluza. And he was saying, the hell we doing all this stuff with vaccines when we have Zofluza? This is like a miracle drug. So that's a whole nother twist to the story. But we got to get ready to go to Patreon. What you're going to see is I'm going to show you. You just go one or two more slides in the charts. Just one more. The season you're in right now.
People in the chat, John, are doubting your claims of being a meanie. I just told everybody you're basically like the mayor of Koh Samui. So I don't know what you're talking about.
And this can be nasty. I'm nasty to people in the chat. When people start talking about the virus,
but in person you're a nice guy.
I have no patience for it. All right, so the net is there's two pandemics happening at the same time. One is SARS-CoV-2, and the other is reconstructed pandemic influenza. It appears, and the reason it appears it's that is because the coroners tell us that people are dying from influenza, and the physicians aren't picking it up in the tests. And the only influenza that's not in the PCR test kit is pandemic reconstructed influenza. So by process of elimination, that must be what we're looking at, because this is coming from the coroners. So this is why that term twindemic was used, 9 months ago. We heard it coming out of the UK. Is there going to be a twindemic going into flu season? And they just stopped reporting.
From YouTube for that twindemic episode.
Wild. Unbelievable. So again, this was a term that came out of the UK where they were asking, while we're battling COVID, are we also going to have to battle the flu? Meaning, are we going to go through two at the same time? And the answer, according to the data, is yes. But nobody knows this. And when you look at the numbers, if you go look at the title, you'll see how many people have died of each this season. And those are big numbers, man. And yes, the COVID deaths are higher, but that's all deaths with COVID. All right? When we take, that's this season, since October 1st, that's the influenza season, so it's all deaths with COVID. When we take 5%, which are the people who died only with SARS-CoV-2 and no comorbidities, well, that's fewer than the number of people that fell down and died. More people have fallen down and died in the United States than have died with just SARS-CoV-2 and not, SARS-CoV-2 in cancer, SARS-CoV-2 in Alzheimer's. That's different. I'm talking about just the 5%. 5% of people that died with just SARS-CoV-2, more people fell down and died.
So wait a minute. Do I understand correctly that you're now advocating to mandate that everybody must walk around in a giant sumo wrestler outfit to prevent slip and fall?
Well, we would save more lives. All right. So first of all, we'd save more lives.
I kind of want one of these.
Well, if we're gonna talk about saving lives, right? We're gonna talk about saving lives. These plus a walker, right? If you're over 18 years old, you're gonna need a walker. And I really do think that we should be mandating helmets. Like you can't drive in NASCAR and not wear a helmet. Well, you shouldn't be able to get out of bed without a helmet because 40,000 Americans fell down and died. 40,000.
Do we get in trouble for showing cartoon boobs on YouTube?
No, cartoon boobs are allowed. Just in fact, you can see Mr. Garrison, Mrs. Garrison. When Mr. Garrison converts over, they show his boobs in the cartoon because it is a cartoon, and you're allowed to see his boobs, and it's fat. It's her. This
is even better. People could be saved by an inflatable COVID costume.
Can you order me one of those? I want that. That's fabulous. So the net of this is there's two viruses. And for the last N weeks, since week number 11, and you're now in week 20, so for the last 9 weeks, over 2 months, more people are dying from influenza PNI in the United States than from coronavirus. Shh, don't tell Anderson Cooper.
What about Mike Bloomberg?
Don't tell Mike. Yeah, this map served its purpose.
One thing we have failed to really investigate with regard to Mike Bloomberg, what is the flavor of the gay ice cream he's eating in that photograph?
That's a future episode. I think we need to dig into that. But I'm going to give the audience a tour of the software probably this week. We're going to walk through all the different pieces and bits, but we got to go to the Patreon thing and go patron only. And we got a whole bunch of video clips. We're going to dig deeper into the data and look at how you can have two pandemics at the same time and why Dr. Fauci loves them talking about Wuhan. Dr. Fauci wants them to talk about Wuhan for the next year because as long as they're talking about Wuhan, they're not talking about Jeffrey Taubenberger and Walter Reed and the reconstruction of the deadliest virus on Earth.
Yeah, that's definitely something that Rand Paul, I would hope, will know about. But you are right, John. We're going to be making the transition over here to the sponsor-exclusive segment on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. I want to thank everybody. I can't remember if I said this during the false start or the actual start, but I've just this morning confirmed that Patreon has opened an official support ticket to resolve the problem that their chief technology officer helped me to identify. That's going to enable the Crowdsource the Truth video server to work with Patreon. So that means hopefully very, very soon we'll be able to restore the entire library of sponsor-exclusive Crowdsource the Truth videos. And there are some other exciting things planned for once that gets activated. I don't want to talk about it too soon because all these computer problems sometimes take a little longer to work out than expected. But we're looking forward to seeing all of our generous sponsors on Patreon and Subscribestar in less than 10 minutes. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a great